Ugh. Hey everybody, welcome to another video, and welcome back to Crazy Nut Reviews Online. Um, this is very late, but Happy New Year, welcome back. If you guys are new to the site, then welcome to the site. In general, it's just a place where I do book reviews, film reviews, anime, and manga reviews, game reviews, and I've got a whole bunch of new content coming up. So, um, 2018's had a bit of a rough start so far from what I've seen, but I'm hoping that we have some smooth sailing from here on. Um, so, recently I went to see the new Jumanji movie. Um, it was not something I wasn't too keen on it at first, um, but to my surprise I actually found it was quite enjoyable. As for why, um, the sort of proverbial elephant in the room. See, I grew up with the 1995 film, and in spite of its occasional scary moments, I loved watching it. So the 1995 film is and was a part of my childhood, and in fact is one of my favorite um, adventure comedy films. Um, the film's spiritual sequel, Zathura, I saw it. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't, or I enjoyed it, but it wasn't as impressive. I didn't enjoy it as much as I'd enjoyed Jumanji. So that's where I'll leave that. Um, so when I heard that they were making a new Jumanji movie, when I saw the initial trailers for it, I thought, no way. You're remaking another one. You're remaking another movie. You're rebooting another series. What's going on here? Surprisingly enough, though, you know, you'll be amazed what boredom will do. I had a choice between the new Star Wars film and Jumanji, and I decided, I wasn't really being fair to the film. I mean, I saw the first trailers way back in March of last year, and I thought, back then already, I was thinking, it's going to be a terrible movie. The jokes are lame. The jokes that they show in the trailers are really just not. They, they were executed very sort of lamely. But again, there's no real context for it, so you know. So I had to pick between the two, and Jumanji would have been the more bearable one. So it was also shorter than Star Wars by a good, I think, like 20 minutes, 10 or 20 minutes or so. So not a huge difference, but yeah. So my youngest sister and I went up to the cinemas on, I believe, the 3rd. It is now the 8th. And so we sat and watched it together, and it was actually really enjoyable. I haven't laughed so hard in a very long time. So that said, what's the story? Well, if you've seen the 1995 film, and this is kind of the problem, if you've seen the 1995 film with Robin Williams, you kind of already know what the plot is, to some extent. The board game Jumanji is found on a beach and gifted to this kid in 1996, and of course, this kid's primary interest is in video games, not board games. So the board game turns itself into a video game, and the kid gets sucked into it, literally, when he starts playing it. And several years later, we have a group of teenagers. They get into trouble at school. They find the board game in what I think is the school basement. Huh? I don't know. Apparently they're trying to make a new computer room or something, and the room needs to be cleared out, and all the things need to be prepped for recycling. And of course, they find the game in the back of the room, and they start playing it. And also end up sucked into it, obviously. Now, and the only way for them to get back is to defeat the game, to get to the final level and beat the game. The only catch, of course, being that they only have 3 lives each, and the theory is that if they lose all 3 lives in the game, that's it. Game over. Like, permanently. So, yeah, that's pretty much the story, is just them moving through Jumanji as their avatars, you know. They select avatars at the start of the game, and when they get sucked into it, they find themselves as the characters that they have selected. So yeah, that's pretty much the story. It's not very original, but the story is very well executed. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But for now, what did I like about the film? Well, the sound design was really good. Now, full disclosure, I don't know anything about film. I don't know about technical angles or lighting or any of that stuff. But I do know what I like, you know? And this film has a beautiful, beautiful score. The music in this film is great. The sound design is very natural. It doesn't feel like machines were involved at all, even though they probably were. It's also a very nice movie to look at. Apparently the film, for the sequences that they were shot, which were supposed to be in the game, in Jumanji, they shot in Hawaii, which is really cool. And it gives us some really beautiful landscape to look at. So the visuals and cinematography in the film were really nice to look at, including some gorgeous jungle shots, and some pretty good sound design, which is a lot more important than one might think. The game, the use of drums. If you've seen the 1995 film, at times you hear these drums that start off really softly and really slowly, and I mean it's only used a couple of times, but it starts off really softly and then builds and builds and builds. But it's only at one point. Here, the drums could have been too much, but they were only used at key moments, and they aren't soft in this film. Every time they come, they are terrifying to you. Now, in die and the use of effects, I was seeing a practical effect, because it feels more believable to me. In this case, because of how well executed it is, I pass. And I mean, I'm not crazy enough to think that everyone practically. In this case, they used CG a lot. I sort of understand to a point what is happening. There are a few moments where you kind of sit there and go, yeah, that's CG, but for the most part, it looks really natural. The actors actually are, you actually believe that these actors are looking at these CG animals. I would imagine that a lot of the animals that they show are very dangerous animals, and you don't really want to get too close to them. So yeah. Again, the sound design is brilliant, terrifying to listen to. They are loud from start to finish. Like the story of the film and the themes and the characters. The story itself is not very original, I will admit, but it's executed very well. The only real problem I have with the story is that nothing is really explained. Although I suppose you could just say it's a magic board game and that would be it. And I loved the depiction of what was in the game. I loved the jungles and the animals and everything. There are also a ton of subliminal messages in this film. They cover teamwork and trust and, accepting each other and trust. Well, I've already said trust, but self-image. One of the characters is this really upset or self-absorbed girl who just kind of, doesn't really accept anybody else's problems. She tends to just ignore everything, and now she's suddenly forced into a position where she has to realize these things. A lot of the characters they each have their own problems regarding, self-image, friendship, confidence, that kind of thing, and they all have to get through this. In terms of the actors, I can't really say much about the guys who are playing the teenagers at the start of the film because I don't know a lot about them. Okay? I know one of them had a Nickelodeon background, but that's about it. On the other hand, I've seen some of the actors who play the avatars in Jumanji in a couple of things. Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart are perfect together. They play off of each other brilliantly here, with Johnson playing the avatar of Spencer, the nerdy kid who suddenly has all this muscle and he can be a lot more confident. Hart playing Anthony, the big sort of muscular 6'4", football player. And he's suddenly a lot smaller. He doesn't have a lot of muscle. He's got some really he's like the weakest one of the weaker characters in the game. And he has to kind of deal with that. I say they were perfect together here because I saw them previously in Central Intelligence, which I believe was, maybe 2 years ago. They were great there as well, and I loved that movie. So they were great there and they were great here as well. Karen Gillan, I have to say I don't know much about her. She plays Ruby Roundhouse, the avatar of Martha, the sort of withdrawn the awkward, sort of introverted, isolated character of the group, and she really does quite a good job of it, playing the girl who's never really bonded with anybody before, and doing it with a level of sincerity that you honestly believe that she is this awkward person. And there's a really great sequence where she has to learn to flirt because she's never done it before. So she has to take lessons from Jack Black. So yeah. And speaking of Jack Black, his performance is the standout performance for me as Professor Shelley Oberon, the avatar of Bethany, the self-absorbed, shallow, pretty girl of the group. And major props to Jack Black because you honestly believe that he is a girl who suddenly finds herself in a man's body and not just a man pretending to be a teenaged girl. He approaches this role very naturally, very sincerely, and it doesn't seem forced at all. He approaches it, as I said, with such a level of realism that I actually kind of hope that they do make a sequel and that they bring this cast back just so that I could see it again. In general, I do not laugh at Jack Black performances in films. I find them very dull and just, for the most part, they don't stand out to me. They don't impress me in any way. He also seems to play the same characters. You know, these sort of misunderstood characters. Or in the case of King Kong, he plays the conniving film producer Carl Denham. Although there he's very much a crazy person. Here, but you know, in this case, I howled with laughter. He is having a blast with this role, and it's definitely the most energetic performance that he has done that I have ever seen in a film. The one exception being maybe School of Rock. But there it kind of felt forced. Here it doesn't, so major props to him. I also have to mention Nick Jonas and Bobby Cannavale. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Cannavale plays the villain of the film, Van Pelt, and I loved it. The 1995 film's portrayal by Jonathan Hyde was brilliant in its own way, but he was very over the top, I felt. And Van Pelt in this film is a character who is surprisingly subtle. The performance that Cannavale gives is just very subtle. He hardly says a word in this film, but a lot of his screen time he's communicating with his body, the way he moves, the way his eyes move. He's using his facial expressions and his body language to communicate this level of menace that you honestly wouldn't want to meet this guy in a dark alley. And like I said, he doesn't say much, so his body language and his facial expressions are key to this film. As for Nick Jonas, I can't really say much, because again, I haven't seen him in much. I've seen him in one or two Disney Channel films, but that's about it, and there it always seemed rather forced. but since then he seems to have really come into his own, and it was just impressive to watch. He seems a lot more relaxed and more natural than any of the Disney Channel movies that I've seen him in over the years. So congrats to him. He's definitely more natural, and hopefully he continues to improve. Now, surprisingly, in answer to the question, what didn't I like? Very little. There was very little, I thought, that you could dislike about this movie. A few people might disagree with me, but with that said, I kind of stand by my statement. There was very little that I didn't like, but with that said, I do have a few minor nitpicks with the film. The first one, of course, being the Jumanji board game magically transforming into a video game. It's never really explained how it happens, but then again, it's supposed to be a supernatural board game, so I suppose you could just say it's magic and be done with it. But that doesn't really answer the question, at least as far as I'm concerned, because then, you still have the question, okay, if it's magic, how does it work? And the second problem is a little bit more complex. It's continuity with the other film. The film begins in 1996. The other film with Robin Williams ended in 1995. Okay, and the game washes up on a beach where these two French-speaking girls are walking along the beach, and they hear the drums, and the one asks, what is that? What are we hearing? Now, of course, when they find it on the beach in 1996, it's buried in the sand, just like it was at the end of the 1995 film. But where's the problem with this? Well, and this might sound a little silly, but it's the town in which the film takes place. Now, the town in the 1995 film is called Brantford, New Hampshire. And the town in this film is also called Brantford, New Hampshire. So, that's kind of odd. And the reason this is such a problem is this film seems to be a sequel, not a reboot, and certainly, or, it seems to be either a reboot or a sequel. I mean, it's a pretty good standalone if that's what it is, but if it's a sequel, which is definitely what it seems to be, then we have this massive continuity error, because at the end of the 1995 film, Alan Parrish and Sarah are sent back to 1969, where they weigh the game down and they throw it off a bridge into a river. And this thing just floats away until it ends up at the before-mentioned beach with the two French-speaking girls talking about it. So if we go about the logic of this being a sequel to that film, how did this game end up back in Brantford, New Hampshire? I mean, are you seriously saying that it floated away from Brantford, ended up, in or around France, and then what magically sort of went poof and ended up back in Brantford. That just doesn't make sense, and that's the second little nitpick of mine. Is actually what fuels my theory that this is actually a reboot, and not a sequel. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not sure. So if anybody has any other theories, feel free to correct me. If it is a sequel, or if you think it's a sequel, please explain. If you can explain this continuity error, please do, because I am so confused by this. If this is a reboot, fine, because if it is a reboot, it's a very good standalone, and you could actually do a lot with it. On the other hand, if this is a sequel, which is what I saw initially seems to make it out to be, then we have the whole thing about how did it end up back in Brantford, when that was where it was, disposed of originally. So yeah, my final thoughts on the film. It's a great comedy film with humor that is actually pretty. It actually works, and this is a rare thing. There are some great messages in this film. The characters and performances were great. The story's premise was admittedly not that original, but it didn't really bother me because it was very well executed. And the best part is, it's actually very family friendly. There are a couple of intense moments which might frighten younger viewers, but overall there isn't really any swearing, and if there is any swearing, I certainly didn't notice it. So yeah, it's a family-friendly action adventure comedy film with great humor, great messages, brilliant performances, a well-executed narrative, with spectacular visuals, good special effects, and overall it's just, I think it's just well worth a watch. So if you haven't seen it already, I really do recommend that you check this out as soon as you get the chance. So yeah, that concludes my review of Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. And considering it's the first review of the year, this is actually pretty good. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free, really do let me know what you thought of the review. You can contact me via the Facebook page, Crazy Nut Reviews. You can go to the comment thread beneath this video. You can go to Instagram. You can go to Twitter. The links will be, or should be, on screen hereabouts somewhere. I seem to have lost the orientation on my screen. Just give me a second. So it should be on the right hand side of the screen. Otherwise, the links will be in the description. So once again, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And you can also go to the website, Crazy Nut Review, or well, the WordPress website, uh, gregcrafts.wordpress.com. The link will be with the other social media stuff. I do have some work on Flipboard, but I don't really use it very much. I will change that though. I do intend to use that a bit more. So, yeah, let me know what you thought of my review, and of the video as a whole if you like. And as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. I loved watching this movie, and the fact that this is the first review of the year, of the month, and of the year has me super psyched. And I hope that my next review will be just as good, if not better than this one. So until the next video, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you once again for the next one. But until then, cheerio, and I will see you for the next video.